headed back from our Nebraska mule trip for this year. Most of you guys that watch us watched the video last year. Me and Kurt and Jordan went out there and had a really good time. Killed some really good deer. This year Kurt and Jordan couldn't go, so I invited Tom out. And we had quite the week. Very interesting. Success, I believe we had more success than we did last year overall, just because we kind of knew where to start. But we also kind of feel like we left some stuff on the field.
Well, that's an understatement. Yeah, the sun is in our rear view mirror, which means we're heading east. And unfortunately for me, I was in a position that I just, because of work demands, I had to leave today. We push it to the very last hour. I've got 3 hours of leeway before I have to be in the office tomorrow morning, so I'm going to drive straight to KC, spend the night, or spend 3 hours in bed and drive to Indianapolis and go to work. Otherwise, we'd still be there.
When you drive 10 hours and you're going to a place that, it's something that we're not accustomed to how we hunt back home. This is all 90% behind binoculars and 10% hunting. And it took us 3 days to really find the deer. We ended up getting on them, and I had a pretty incredible hunt, but it was sort of kind of my fault as far as the video work that went into it. My goal was to get you a deer. So I wanted you to hunt first, and so I had dropped Tom off at a spot that we were seeing some deer, and I just parked the truck, walked across the road, and I was looking down at another canyon, and I found some deer, and they were bedded down, and I didn't take a camera, I didn't take a bow, I didn't have anything but a set of binoculars. And I texted Tom and I said, you need to get over here, we've got some deer. And anyway, he shows up, brings my bow, and we had a little bit of miscommunication, but by the time he had gotten there, the deer had got up and they were getting ready to head into some corn. So I grabbed the bow, went in after them, and instead of going in the corn, they ended up going over the hill. And Tom thought that, he stayed back to film. He thought I had shot, and I'm up there standing there watching them go over the hill, and I'm waving at Tom. And turns out we bird dogged them for, I don't know, probably close to a mile, and they went over a couple ridges, and we got slipped around in on them. We had the wind perfect. It was blowing really hard. And then, so you're dealing with high winds, you're dealing with sunlight, and this little camera that I've got has got a tiny screen, and Tom's old man eyes.
You can say it, 53-year-old eyes. They were really good for a really long time.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
And anyway, we got to where I didn't think the deer were going to come any closer. Even if they walked down the other side of the canyon, they were still going to be like right at 80 yards. And I don't really want to shoot that far, especially in a 20 to 25 mile an hour wind. So I kind of rolled the dice. I backed up, I slid down, and got lucky the deer didn't see me, and I was able to get on the side of the canyon that they were at. And as soon as I got up there, peeked over the ridge, and I was right at 56 yards. And that kind of had my mind at ease. The wind wasn't blowing quite as much because it was coming over the top of the canyon, so I slipped up just a little bit farther and was able to put a shot on the deer. The closest I could get was 51, and aimed for the last rib. He was quartering away, and it come out right in his armpit, and the deer almost run you over. That was pretty slick. And anyway, the deer goes up there, lays down, and I put an extra shot on him, and we're celebrating in the canyon. And that was a heck of a hunt, one that I'll never forget.
I don't know how that deer left.
I don't know either.
Did you see the shot?
Oh yeah.
Quartered away, 51 yards. Last rib, exit was in his armpit.
Really? You see, all I could see was the ugly side over here, and I thought that's where.
No, that was the entrance. And his, of course, his
Yeah.
face come out. But, no, last rib.
No
and
kidding.
There was no wind over there. I was hidden behind it, rock steady. He was rubbing on that tree. Yeah, it came out. It came out and then it went back in.
Okay.
But there's an exit hole in his armpit.
Dang God.
guess I did hit him a little farther back than I thought. But it's right, I mean, he was quartered pretty hard.
Yeah.
And I was afraid he was going to walk straight away around that bush and go up that hill, but look at the exit line.
Yeah, that's
right there.
From our side. I had no idea that it did that.
That's my second shot right here.
Yeah.
But I hit him dead in that top of that shoulder. I was trying to slide it right there and jackknife it in there.
Right.
That first shot was going to kill him.
Oh yeah.
I was scared he was going to get down in these canyons and we weren't going to be able to blood trail him, so
No,
I stayed on him.
Did the right thing. Awesome.
High and tight.
Absolutely awesome. Gorgeous animal. That dark forehead.
Yeah.
Smoky gray face. That's just cool. And the interesting thing for me was, compared to what you guys had last year, the deer were very regularly coming to these water holes.
Yeah.
Basically tanks, above ground metal structures with a well drilled next to them for the cattle. And in these canyons, it's really dry and arid. And these water tanks are spaced every quarter to half mile apart, maybe sometimes farther. And last year, you guys found that they were just hitting those consistently every day, every night, and you could see a lot of deer. In Nebraska, as much of we did in the Midwest, had a lot of rain this year, so there are pools and puddles in there, and they're a lot greener, and there were a lot more places and options for them for water.
Yeah, so it made it a lot more challenging of a hunt to us because we basically had to take it to them instead of waiting on them, and I'm fine with that. But all the crops are still standing. It was 90 degrees every day we were there, so you basically had 30 minutes in the morning and maybe an hour if you were lucky in the afternoons. And the day that I killed, we just happened to get lucky. We had a cold front roll through for that one day, and it was a high like 72, and they just felt comfortable laying out in the sunshine that morning.
If we had several days like that day, if that weather would have stayed in place, it was absolutely incredible. Those deer were on their feet everywhere, laying out in the open, feeling that cool breeze on them. Even driving to and back in the dark, we saw deer everywhere. It went from 95 to a high of 72 with a nice 15 to 20 mile an hour cool north wind. And even us, we put on jackets that morning because it was so fall-like.
I was actually cold right before you got there with my bow.
But by the way, that was pretty amazing because we were 1.3 miles apart, and I got the text, and you mentioned about you wanted me to bring the equipment, and I'm thinking, all right, Casey's on a deer. My mind didn't go to me shooting a deer. I'll get the camera and I'll sit behind him. So I showed up, as he said, with his bow and quiver and release, and I put my bow away. Or did I? I can't remember now. But anyway, I was because I was carrying the camera equipment. And he was wanting to get me on a deer, but I was thrilled that he was on something, so we just went after him.
So when you got there, I was like, well, crap, but we got to go do something because these deer are gonna. When you see a deer like that in those canyons, I hate to let them get out of sight for more than a few minutes because you never know where they're gonna hit. So, like I said, we bird dogged them for a long ways and finally got in position to take the shot. But we got that one done, and we should have done
the same thing
that afternoon. We found a deer. It's actually in the same canyon, just down a little ways. We slipped in there, peeked over an edge, and there's one of the deer. We actually seen the deer the first day we pulled in. He was running around out in the field with 4 other bucks, 28, 29 inches wide.
Quiet.
He didn't have the splits like a normal. He looked like a whitetail, and he had a couple extra. He had a little kicker and was still in velvet. And you put a beautiful stock on him, and it just didn't quite work out.
Oh man. Okay, here's a few things and I'm not making excuses by any means. It's my first year going to a single pin site with the adjustable wheel on the side of it, and I felt confident in that's ability. But you and I noticed at the farm when we were just checking, making sure we were still sight in before we hunted, that my rangefinder was reading completely different ranges than Casey's, and mine was, I mean, way off, like 30 yards when we were ranging at 80. So now I have this lack of confidence in my gear, and he opted to let me carry his rangefinder, which was awesome. But we saw this deer bedded down on the shadowed side of a canyon wall, and by the time we got all the way around to where we could even take a position to do a stalk on him, the sun was getting down below the hill, and it was like, you got to go now or never. And the wind was marginal, but we had an idea that we could just, if I could get down and stay just this side of him, the wind was going to be 20 yards short of being in his favor by the time I got over where I could maybe peek over and see him.
And it worked perfect.
It worked perfectly. Had we had another 30 minutes, it could have been, in my mind, I wouldn't have been forced with that in your face, you got to react now. I would have had more time to be calculated about it. My heart's pounding, sweat is running down my face. You know, you just did a 200-yard sprint in pretty hilly country. And as I was coming up that bank, I saw the tips of his tines coming towards me. So now it's like, I didn't even have time to settle down, didn't have time to compose myself and use the rangefinder. So I grabbed and knocked an arrow, pulled the rangefinder up on him, his head comes over, and he's looking right at me. So then there's another level of stress. And in my mind, I said, he's 35 yards. That just from experience, he looked like he was 35 yards. Yeah. Which I looked down at my wheel, I spun it to 35, but then the deer put his head down and turned sideways. So I picked up your rangefinder, clicked on it, nothing happened. Which mine comes on the instant you lay your finger on it, and nothing happened. So then I kind of panicked and hit it a couple times. But when I hit it twice, it started reading ranges, and I gotta admit, I was shaking. I was adrenaline rush and heart beating. I ranged him a couple times, and it said 42.5. So I spun my wheel to 42. And was able to, and I had, this all happened within 3 seconds too, by the way. It's not, and as he took those few steps forward, I drew and settled the pin on him the best I could. Settled is an air quote. And the arrow sailed right over his back.
Yeah. And I was at a point on top of the mountain where, you know, I was in plain view of him, and I didn't want to come over anymore just for fear of him skylighting me. So right when you shot, I was trying to pick the camera up just a little because he was going down underneath the yucca plant that was right in my way. Yeah. So it was a cluster. Basically, you sum up the whole week, we had a great time. We saw some really good deer. But when it came to the filming side, we
left a lot to be desired.
We didn't have our A game together. That's for sure. And to top it all off, we find a deer the day before we have to leave, and we get on him, and we basically run out of time. And this could possibly be a to be continued video, but we're just going to give you this. Look how giant that deer is.
And no, you can't have his coordinates.
We know within 50 yards of where he's laying right now, but we had to go home. So, hopefully, to be continued. Maybe not.
That needle in a haystack in a big sea of CRP. And we get in there this morning, and I get to the highest spot in the fence row possible, and out of all odds, I see that tip of that buck's antlers walking through the CRP, and then as I'm watching him, he disappears, and the 5 does that he is with move on out, and I'm plainly watching them leave. So I'm marking a spot of brush in the field, and I'm thinking he is right there. And you talk about a long, slow, quiet, steady stalk. By the time I got there, just from being quiet and holding still, I was sweating, and the deer wasn't there.
Slippery.
Or he was there, and I walked within a distance of him, and he didn't get up. because parts of that were eye level with switchgrass and Indian grass in there in such a density that he could have been 10 yards at any direction from me, and if he held tight, I wouldn't have seen him. All right, enough of that.
Well, at least we get to come home with one deer.
That's right. It was a great experience to watch that happen and be a part of that.
I swear every time I look at this deer too, he grows. I don't know. I mean, he's not a giant like what we killed last year out there, but he was mature and
awesome hunt.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get any better than
perfect.
We put a clinic on him.
Maneuver using the terrain to your advantage and the wind and getting around, and that was a lot of fun. I grabbed your camera, which I'd never run, and I didn't know it at the time, but you had there's a setting on the focus that's called peaking, and if you don't know what that means, when you're looking through it, it almost looks like snowflakes on the parts that are focused, and then as they go
I run that because when I'm solo filming,
a
lot of times I get in a position where I can't like totally focus in on the screen, so I'm like looking at it sideways, and I just roll it till I see that peaking focus, and whatever is shining white is in focus. And it's very nerve-wracking when you first learn how to run it like that, because you don't know to trust it.
Right.
But after running it, and then I'll go back and I edit the video, and I get to watch how it works, and you put 2 and 2 together, and like and it works really well. But like I said, we didn't have time to talk about it beforehand because it's I don't know, it's the heat of the moment, and
there was a lot of things that were just you had to make a quick snap decision and just go with it.
I know.
And I didn't have my reading glasses on, which I desperately need, and your screen's about that small.
It is little.
And I was trying to watch the hunt too, which you're not supposed to do as a videographer. You're supposed to watch it through the lens.
Yeah.
And this was my first mule deer hunt ever, and this was such an exciting turn of events happening in front of my eyes, and I wanted to see it too. And unfortunately, I'm bouncing a lot, and anyway, enough excuses. It was still an awesome time, and I appreciate you allowing me to tag along with you this year.
Hey, I had a great time, and whether we get the really fancy good video or not, it's still some experiences that you'll never forget, and you'll never. It's a different type of hunting, and I posted a picture of my deer on Facebook, and I said that there's really not a more rewarding hunt than what we just did. It's just and some people ask me, how is it different from managing land or having trail cam pictures of deer and watching them throughout the year, and that has its own type of satisfaction that is unlike anything else. But when you drive, like I said, you drive 10 hours, you pack the truck up, and you're going to places that you've never been, and you don't know what's over the next hill. There's just there's a certain type of mystery that's involved in that, and you're packing a whole lot of stress on your shoulders of you have 5 days or 6 days to pull something off that is almost impossible, to get a deer that they're so in tune with their surroundings that as soon as you come over a ridge, they can spot you, they can hear you coming.
Yeah.
And when you pile all the things that are going against you as a bow hunter together, and think about that, and whenever it finally happens, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we just did it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain unless you've been there and done it, but it's something that I hope I can do every single year. It's just something different to kind of get you away from the normal routine of what we do on a daily basis, and it kind of gets you in shape for whitetail season.
I'm pretty sure I lost some pounds this week, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, not only is it physically tasking, it's mentally tasking, but you also, like when you're preparing for this type of hunt, you're shooting at 60, 70, 80 yards, and you're trying to get your groups in under a 3 or 4 inch group. And I find that when whitetail season comes around and he's inside 40 yards, you feel like I can make that shot.
Piece of cake.
I don't know what else to say. Nebraska 2019 in the books.
For now.